Okay, we are live. Hi, everyone. Angela Fair here, and we're ready to start our very first critique session. And I'm glad to be here. As I mentioned in the chat, it's been a bit of a crazy weekend. We had company come. I actually had messaged my in-laws and said, this is a weekend that we are available. If you want to come and visit this summer, this weekend, we're free. And by being free, I meant we only had 3 events that we were already committed to, and so we were able to do some fun stuff. You may have seen our photos of our trip to Red Deer Falls. Beautiful day out in the backcountry of British Columbia, and then just the hectic busyness of having 3 teenagers and having a company. And they just left, and I have my studio back. It's also doubles as a guest room. I have a bed in the back, and if you ever are in my area and you need a place to crash and paint, this is the spot. So, but I kind of hoard it. It's really hard. It's getting harder and harder to share my studio because I so just want to be in here painting. And when I have company, it's actually really tough to balance that, enjoying the people that you love in your life, and then also giving up my agenda. The things that I usually do on Monday, I couldn't do. And so then here I am Tuesday morning scrambling to get ready for this critique session. And I'm bringing that up just because I think managing expectations isn't just a part of life, but it's also huge in terms of how we handle our thoughts about our paintings. And so as we move into this critique session, and I'm thinking about your expectations and the things you're hoping to hear in a critique, and the things you might be looking for. And then I guess I'm just thinking that I really firmly believe that we get what we need. And so it never feels like enough. When I was a mom of little toddlers, I remember just praying for strength and patience with my little ones. And it never felt like I had like a surplus of strength and patience. And yet we always got through those tough days. And I believe that for our art too. And I have an illustration of this. Actually, I was thinking about my very first critique session. And yeah, sorry, just looking at the chat. Robin's letting you know if you can't see or hear me at this point, reload your page. Okay, so I was thinking about the very first critique session I attended, and I really only have 2 critique stories from my life as an artist. And the very first time I was a mom of little kids, and I had juried into the Federation of Canadian Artists, or I was thinking about jurying in there. It's a national arts group, and you need to have your art approved in order to become a member. And so to be juried into that federation felt like a big deal. It was a big deal. I wanted to have art that was worthy and to be hung alongside the professional artists who were hanging in the Federation shows. And so when a Federation member came up and to jury, to look at the artwork of the applicants and jury them in, I was a part of that. And it was really a huge honor to be chosen as a potential member. And I've been a member ever since. And that's been probably 10 or 12 years now. And members and being a member of arts groups and stuff, that's something we should discuss. We'll have an art business chat one of these days, and we can talk about stuff like that, and whether it's beneficial or not, because there's differing points of view on that kind of thing. And I have opinions, and I can share them, but not here, not now. Anyhow, so I had wanted to be a part of this critique session that this artist was also providing for potential members. And so I brought several of my paintings. I think we had to pick 3. And I brought my children, which I also had to pick 3 because I didn't have a babysitter. And so I had 3 little toddlers. Wesley was probably 2. Samantha would have been 4 and Rory would have been 5. And that's an age where 3 little kids in an enclosed space, they tend to rile each other up just a little bit. It gets hard for them to sit and be quiet. And so when we went up to the critique session, I thought, I'm really hoping that they can pick my artwork first. I can get it over with quickly. And then I can take my kids and go. So I don't disrupt everybody and have chaos with little kids at an art session. And unfortunately, I am also not a pushy person. And so I really didn't feel comfortable speaking up and saying, I'm worried about my kids' behavior. Can I get critiqued first? And so I didn't. I waited. I thought, surely this artist will see that it's going to be really hard for me to stay and be towards the end of the session. And so she'll pick my paintings to go, early in the session. But she didn't. And so I'm waiting, and my kids are getting antsier and antsier, and they're starting to tease each other and, beg for things and pull on my skirts or whatever. And finally, and she's critiquing other artists' work, and I'm seeing good insights in what she was sharing with those artists. And I really wanted to know what she thought of my work. And I couldn't stay. The kids got too noisy, and I just was getting really, really stressed and frustrated, and I just thought, I have to leave. And so I shamefacedly packed up my kids, packed up my paintings, and slithered out of there, feeling about half an inch tall. And it was mortifying and so disappointing because I really wanted to hear some outside opinion on my artwork. And so I don't know what I learned from that, except for maybe to be bolder in speaking up and asking for what I need. It wasn't an unreasonable request to say, can I go first? So you all don't have to suffer with my noisy children. And yet, maybe it just wasn't right at that time for me. Maybe I didn't need that artist's critique, as much as I thought I did. I was yearning for it. I really, wanted that outside opinion. And yet, in being kind of alone with my work over, those years, I had to decide how I felt about my work. And I think part of my goal for these critique sessions is to provide that opportunity for you. Learning how to critique your own work is really, really important. And I want to illustrate that because it's important. We're just going to switch over to my work surface so I can show you a couple of things. Okay, so this is a painting I was working on this last week before my company showed up. And this is a waterfall, not the waterfall I went to last weekend, but it's one in the same region. And actually, I'm kind of happy with this painting now, looking at it with fresh eyes, because when I finished it, and I recorded this, and it's going to be a lesson in the Fearless Artist community very soon. But when I finished it, I just felt like it lacked kind of that Angela punch that I wanted to have. It felt competent, but it didn't feel as authentic as I wanted it to be. And I think that you know what I mean by that. When we talk about painting as a heart-led artist, we are really thinking about making that connection to us, the artists, before we share it with the world. So my criteria for whether or not this is a successful painting, because I know you're going to all say wonderful things about it, but my criteria for whether or not this is a successful painting is very dependent on how I feel about it. And how I feel about it today is not the same way that I'm going to feel about it a year from now or 10 years from now, because 25 years ago, okay, my math isn't very good. 1992, I painted my very first watercolor painting, and I found it, so here it is. And this is actually painted on printer paper. It's not very good quality paper, and I don't even know where I got those watercolors from. I think they're probably like the Crayola Child's Cakes of watercolor paint. Yeah, probably. And yet I was incredibly proud of this painting. This was the best thing that I was able to do in 1992 at 15 years old. And so what's that, 27 years ago. And so my critique of this painting, for me, the 15-year-old, I'm not expecting from this what I would be expecting now as a 42-year-old painting. So when we're critiquing our work, we get to be proud of what we're doing right where we're at, while recognizing the potential that we have for the future. Another one I want to show you is actually after I took my first watercolor lesson. This is a landscape that I did. And there's two paintings, two for the price of one. That was hidden underneath. And these were painted in my very first watercolor course. And I was learning, how to, I remember feeling so proud of my ability to create those shadows under the buildings so that they actually looked like buildings. And, I had no idea of color theory. I had no concept of just anything really. I was just learning and it was so exciting. And I was incredibly proud of these paintings. And I'm still proud of them. I'm proud of how they represented the artist that I was at the time and the artist that I was becoming. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, because my criteria then for a perfect painting is not the same as the criteria I hold now. And I just, and I don't think that looking at those now, I don't look at that and go, well, those were clearly the work of a potential professional artist who'd get to teach thousands of people all over the world. That wasn't where I was, but I was someone who just was falling in love with watercolor, and that's really important. And I got to connect to the parts of those paintings that I love. One thing I love about those paintings is that they hold some of the same beautiful colors I love today. And unfortunately, it's really overcast today, and my lighting is terrible. So everything looks very blue, but there's some really beautiful kind of pinky beiges in there that are really nice. And one of those paintings is very warm, one is very cool. So it's just neat to see just how already my preferences for color and shape are visible there, even though they're not fully birthed yet. And that's really cool. We get to be our own artist, even though the artist we're going to be is not fully born or fully alive. We have a few problems, and we're going to move over to your paintings in just a moment. I've gone through what we're doing with these critique sessions. I'll just let you know how it works. If you're new to this, I'm actually pretty new to this too. And as I mentioned in my email, it's really, I kind of dread doing critiques because I don't want to do them wrong. I don't want to discourage you. I don't want to put on you expectations that you are not ready to meet. If you're a new painter and you're just learning how to master brush handling, and I start talking to you about complex compositional issues, that can feel really overwhelming, when really what you just need to do is be focused on, that one area that you're developing. I think, piling too much on you is going to overwhelm you, and it's going to cause you to struggle even more. And then the other thing that happens is it's really easy to talk about realism. To say, well, here's how you should paint to get your painting to look like the photo. But that's not our goal as heart-led artists. We want to, actually our goal is to open up the process of creativity and to allow that to flow into our paintings. And so it's an easy out to say, well, if you just darken this over here, it would look more realistic, or here's how you can fix that perspective issue. And we're sidestepping the actual problem, which is, how are you showing who you are in your work? So we don't want to do that. The other temptation is that we might, it's really easy to focus just on how to fix the problems in your painting. We focus on those surface errors, rather than getting deeper, really getting into the heart of what you want to say. And that's kind of the same as our second point, but it's really important that we recognize that we're here to paint authentic, heart-led work. The spirit of our work is what we want to show through. And I love the interview with David Hockney. He's talking about Van Gogh, and he's talking about how perspective, and I've shared this in the group before, but I can share it again if you haven't seen it yet. It's an interview with David Hockney talking about Van Gogh, and he says perspective is a killer. He says perspective can kill your paintings. It can strangle the life out of them if you're trying to get everything perfect, instead of recognizing that sometimes we get to elaborate and embellish and flatten perspective, and we get to play with all of these different pieces of our paintings in order to make them more truly us. And I think one person who really had fun playing with perspective was Salvador Dali. We know all about his melting clocks paintings and how he really was willing to push what was real. And actually his paintings show really accurate use of form. I mean, he was actually really good at depicting the contours of those clocks melting on the painting. And yet, he was totally willing to challenge what people might expect to see. And sometimes when we surprise people by putting something unexpected in our paintings, that's more powerful than any photorealism we can put in. Okay, so your paintings in the group, what I did was yesterday I sat down and I went through all the paintings that were tagged #critique. Robin will put that in the in the chat here just to show you what that hashtag looks like. I know hashtags are new for some of you. What hashtags are is really just an easy way to search up content. The hashtag is kind of that clue that this is a keyword, and then the word attached to it just makes it easy to search. And so anything that was hashtag critique, I was going through and I chose about a dozen that we're going to look at. Unfortunately, I just can't pick them all. And I will be trying to, if I don't talk about them today, I will be trying to comment on them in the community. And I do try to go through the critique posts at least once a week and just give some input and insight. Now, it makes it much easier for me to critique your work if you do a few things to make it easier for me. If you include a good description, and I think this is true actually for any painting you're posting online or in the community, is when you share your thoughts, it makes it easier for other people to give you input. So if you're wanting people to engage with your work, telling us what your goals were, telling us what you think about the painting, sharing some context really makes it easier for us to engage with your work. Tell us what's working in the painting. What do you like? What are you concerned about? What do you have questions about? Do you have a favorite part of the painting? What did you struggle with? And then any questions about technique you have, you can include those as well. The better your description and the sharing of your thoughts, the easier it is for us to engage with your work and for me to give a good critique. The other thing that makes it easier is if I've been seeing your work in the community on a fairly consistent basis. The better I know you, the easier it is to know what direction you're heading, and where to kind of help guide you, and what you're ready to hear and what you're not. I'm not going to, if I was teaching you piano, I wouldn't pull out a two-handed piano piece if you had only at that point learned to play with one hand. I would tailor my instruction to what you were ready to learn, and we do that in painting as well. My number one goal in giving critiques is not to tear your painting apart and tell you everything that's wrong with it. I want to encourage you. You're not going to keep painting if you feel overwhelmed and discouraged. And I want to help you be self-directed. Something that I gained from not having my work critiqued in that critique session was that I had to direct myself, figure out what I wanted out of my work. And that took a lot of false starts and missteps. And I don't know, false starts and missteps is actually the wrong word, because I learned a lot in those false starts. But I learned how to analyze my own work and to be my own final adjudicator of the work. What if I'd been in that critique session and that artist had given me advice that would have taken me in a direction different than what I actually wanted to achieve? What if she'd given me all kinds of advice to be a more realistic painter, and I'd plunged into that direction with fervor, and how far would I have gone down that road before I'd realized where my heart truly was? So it's really important as I give critiques here for me to be wise in what I share, so that I don't send you down a wrong path, and that you recognize that number one is just that you need to be self-directed. And finally, as you learn how to evaluate your work based on your conditions and your terms, I want you to recognize too that getting a critique from me, well, I didn't name this the Angela Fair Watercolor Community for a reason. This is our Fearless Artist community. This is about you, my fearless artists. And one reason I created this community, it was my vision from last year. I realized I deal with so many wonderful people in my watercolor instruction, and I wanted you to get to the chance to know each other and to collaborate together. And so this, I'm here to serve you to the best of my ability. And as my audience has grown, I wasn't able to reply personally to emails anymore. I'm very limited in how thin I can spread myself. And so my number one priority is reaching out to my fearless artists. And so that's where I'm learning how to use the community to be able to engage with you better. rather than just some random person who saw me one time on YouTube and then sent in a question by email. I don't have to answer those, but I get to come to here to my Fearless Artist community and connect with you guys first. So I hope that makes sense. I really think that you are fearless artists. You are courageous to desire a personal fearless style that isn't dependent on outside approval. You're here to paint first to please your inner artist and learn who that is. And so to heck with what I think. And so let's critique. Let's, on that note, let's please yourself first. Paint till you're happy. Then we can move into critiquing our work based on how it makes us feel. And yeah, that is our goal for our work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up a window here in just a sec. I got to get it set up. And I have a wonderful PDF printable content that I've printed. I believe it is. I believe I've shared it before with you, but I want to make that available to you again. I've titled it "Critique Yourself," and it's a bit of a guide on how to critique your work. So we're going to. So I'm going to share that in the community one more time, just in case you don't have a copy of it, and you'll be able to download that and use it as you critique your own work. Now, as we move into our critique session, I'm just going to show you some different artists' paintings, and we're going to talk about what we see in the work and things you can do to continue to build upon your strengths is number one. So let's see here. Oh, that's the wrong button. There we go. Okay, so now you should be able to see Barb's painting. Barb shared this in the community earlier this week. And one comment, I love the vibrant colors here, Barb, and the really fearless color. And it's interesting because you can basically divide this painting into two halves. We have the sky area, everything above that dark line of trees. And then we have the lower half, which I believe is a marsh. It's water reflected on the landscape. And when I say I believe something is, it's like when children bring you their drawing and you're supposed to say, "Oh, what a beautiful airplane," and they're like, "No, it's a hippo." I don't want to do that to you. But the neat thing is that in our paintings, what we see is interpretive. So I have a painting, a floral painting I sold to a friend, and she is certain that the flowers in that painting are foxgloves. And I had painted loose strife or something. So I had painted a completely different flower, but she has a personal connection to a different type of flower. And so that's what she chooses to see in the painting. And I have not corrected her because I'm just so glad she has that connection. That's what it's all about. So we don't have to worry if people can't tell what the stuff is in our painting if they're connecting to it emotionally. That's a good thing. And I love the energy in this painting. And that was one thing I wanted to comment on. That's where we connect emotionally to our work is that energy, that fearless brushstrokes. Now, the deal here is, and one thing I commented to Barb was that perhaps the white spaces in the water, those reflections, were kind of distracting in a way. What we see is we've got a lot of movement in the sky. And if we want to make the focal point that beautiful, vivid sky, yes, we need reflective colors in the lower half of the painting. We need to see those sky colors reflected in the water, and we want that. But by having a lot of crisp edges in the water, there is a little sense of competition between those two halves of the painting. So what happens is when you feel like there's this tension where your eye is darting back and forth between two dominant areas, you have to decide which area is the most important and how do we tone the other one back so that they balance out a little bit. So I see two things we could do. And Barb, I had just given you one suggestion of putting just a pale wash of like a blue-gray over the white reflections in the water so that they were just a little darker in value and would then kind of recede a little bit more. And so you did that in your next version or in your next one. And I'm a little sad you lost your trees here. At the same time, if you're feeling a tension between certain elements in your paintings, I'm not going to say, oh, that was the wrong thing to do. That's not what we're at here, is that there's only one right way to do things. Paintings are infinite possibilities. And so we get to explore and experiment and then take that learning with us to the next painting. So here we have the sky's been toned down really, and the drama of the trees. So our eye is much more immediately drawn to the lower half of the painting. So that was one option. Another option would have been, and I'm just going to go back to the first one again, would be perhaps to have cropped a little bit of the top of the painting. And sometimes if you're feeling a tension in your painting and you're not really sure where to go with that tension or what to do, playing with different croppings can be a huge way to, well, just a really good way to kind of experiment with your ideas without having to commit. You can take a photo of your painting and then crop it in all kinds of different ways in your computer or on your phone or whatever, and you'll see all kinds of possibilities, and it'll bring those different elements in your painting into different balances. So I think what you want to bring with this, from this painting into the next one, Barb, is I love the beautiful colors. I love the strong edges. Placing those edges in your focal point area is the most important or the most powerful way to create that contrast that brings the eye right to your focal point. So we strengthen some areas and we make others slightly quieter. I hope that makes sense. Okay, this one, and I think unfortunately everything's in alphabetical order and my notes are not. So this one is by Dee. Dee, I love that you shared your reference photo. And actually you have two crops of your reference photo, which I think is smart as well. We have different options. And I just with one reference photo, to crop it in different ways and to try square versions, try tall verticals, try long, narrow verticals. Dee's comment is, this is a small sketch of a drift of bluebells in a glade. I'm aiming to keep it simple and look for the big abstract shapes. And this is really powerful. That goal, keeping it simple, looking for the big abstract shapes, that should almost always be your first layer goal in your painting. Look at those overall shape patterns. In Dee's reference photo, and I'm looking at the one on the lower left, we see that the top half of the photo is divided by that big tree. So we actually have basically 3 sections of painting plus that tree in the middle. And that's a really good way to simplify. And then squinting at your reference photo is always a good way to kind of see the patterns of light and dark, as well as those major shapes. And notice that I didn't say, the bluebells are one major shape and then the rest of the grass in that lower half is the second major shape. I'm actually seeing that as all one. Simplify as much as possible to make your painting stronger, and then you can add detail to the extent that you're comfortable with as you go further. Dee also adds, I like the feel and the looseness, but I think I could ramp up the blue color and make it pinker. And something needs to change in the transition between the middle ground and the foreground. This one's tempting me towards a series. And I love that it's tempting you towards a series, Dee, because that's such a good way to really get to know your scene and to try all those different variations. When you're doing one version, you really just get that one chance, that series of decisions. And if there's anything you want to do over, it's really hard to do that on the same painting. It's often much easier to start a new version and just keep adding on the next piece of paper. So yeah, do that series. I'd love to see that. I also think that your foreground is actually quite dark. So I think by darkening the value in the foreground, keep it nice and simple. We tend to add too much detail in our foregrounds because being the area that's closest to the camera, we see the most detail in our photograph. That doesn't always mean it's important to put it in there. So that's just something to keep in mind. Thank you for sharing that one, Dee. Moving on. Elizabeth, I think this one's yours. I spelled your name wrong on the screen here, but I know what it is. Okay, Elizabeth, let me see where you are in my notes. Okay, I love you showing your process here, Elizabeth. You said, this is the exploration of a sunset painting. I would like to bring in the silhouette of trees and buildings, but I'm not happy with my first attempt at doing this. Suggestions would be welcome. Okay, so I love that you're listing your colors and trying out different hues here and just to see what works. And keeping track of that is really helpful, especially if you're still getting to know your palette and you're not as familiar with the way the colors mix as you'd like to be. I've been painting for so long that it's not difficult for me to remember what different colors do, and I tend to use a small range of colors to obsession for a while, so I can really get to know them and anticipate how they're going to mix, and then gradually add in other colors that I'm less familiar with. Now, I think what you're struggling with, because I think you have some beautiful options for skies and a lot of fun playing with those mixtures, is and just continuing to see amazing variety. And the magic of this painting is really in that sky. So have fun with it and be willing to be dynamic and to push those dramatic transitions between the blue and the pink. And kind of there's a violet in the middle. And for your shadows, you're on the right track. Actually, I think this is a great beginning. One mistake I always made painting silhouettes early on was painting them as flat black. But if you're standing out looking at a sunset, we don't see flat black. We see variations. We usually see a warm, rich dark. And yeah, the dark is often quite warm. So mixing your darks is a great way to do it. And Elizabeth's wisely mixing her black mix from her sky colors, and that gives color harmony. And then adding that variation. And I think it's working really well. I think what you want to just keep doing is tweaking those silhouettes, getting a silhouette pattern the way a little bit, one that really pleases you. And I like the watery marks in there. You might want to play with having some softer edges maybe in like that biggest tree on the right, and just exploring what that looks like. And then be willing to use creative license to vary the kind of ups and downs of the sizes of your silhouette. Just really have some fun playing with it. You don't have to make it complex to make it work. If you've got good drama in your sky, just a very simple little frame beneath can, and actually I think putting that flag in would be really fun to see. It would give that painting just tell a story a little bit, I think. So there's that. Okay, moving on. The next one is Evelyn's. Evelyn, I just had to share this, and also you'll notice in the Fearless Artist community, Evelyn Vanderland and Stephanie Youngerman have both agreed to join us as moderators in the Fearless Artist community. Basically what this means is they're going to help us keep an eye on things and make sure that you're getting what you need from our group. They're amazing people, positive artists who love this heart-led Fearless Artist style. I think they're a great fit to be members of the group, and I'm going to introduce them more formally in the group as well. But they're also going to kind of man the help desk. So if you're having trouble navigating the Fearless Artist community, Evelyn and Stephanie are there to kind of help you find what you need. And they're also going to let me know just how do I put this? I'm in the group every day, and yet it's really easy to miss something. If you're sharing, great content, or if there's a great discussion going on, I want to know about it. So they're going to help me make sure I don't miss any of that good stuff. So that I'm very excited about that. Thank you, Evelyn. And thank you, Stephanie. Evelyn says, I've been playing with this reference during the course here in Heart-Led Landscapes, and I still have much more to explore. I'm wondering how to, or if I need to, bring focus to the foliage and trees growing on the rotten beams of the abandoned bridge. And she says, I was struck by this scene last year. I did a couple of paintings from memory since I didn't get a photo then. And this spring we drove by and I was able to take pictures. The trees and growth on the bridge deck as well as at the bridge itself were the highlight in my memory. Is this too large and complicated for a focal area? Should I reduce and soften the background trees to pop the bridge area? Do I have enough contrast? She's got all kinds of questions. Evelyn, stop doubting yourself. This is so beautiful. I really think you've done a beautiful job on this painting. The softness, like the way you painted the bridge deck, I think is just really beautiful and soft. And yet it gives us that form and structure. I think if you'd painted it with the strong shapes that I'm usually tempted to use, it would look, it wouldn't have that kind of softer abandoned feel. And I love how it feels like it's just kind of melting into the forest, like it's being reclaimed by nature. It tells a story just by the way you've treated it in your painting. I I think there's too much that's working here for you to really worry about doubting yourself in the painting. If I had to be nitpicky, and I know you're at a level where I can pick out little things, that little tiny things that could be tweaked maybe, or thought about for next time. There is a lot of the crisp edge of the top left corner tree mass could be maybe a little bit softer, because it is just a little bit, my eye just keeps going there just a little bit. So if you soften that a tiny bit, it might just balance it out a little bit better. But I think one thing that's really neat here is this isn't a super high contrast painting. There are some contrasts, and it's neat how when your values are in a fairly tight range, like if everything in your painting falls in kind of the 3 to 8 or 3 to 6 value range, nothing's really, really dark and nothing's really, really pale, you still get contrast, but it's just a lot more subtle. And I love the way that dark underside of the bridge deck just keeps pulling my eye back to that focal point. This is just really lovely, Evelyn, so stop worrying about it. Len shared a couple, and I wanted to bring out this one because look at how beautifully, Len, you've improvised from your reference photo. And I think that's marvelous. Now I'm wondering how much of that, and I guess I should look at my notes. Okay, so this is a scene that you know. This is a place you know and have been to. So you have inside information that isn't showing in the reference photo, which I think is really a good thing to note. We get to bring in our own experience and our own insights into our paintings. This is Mono Lake, which is very high in minerals. And you said I didn't want to paint it in shades of gray and tan. So I dove into indigo, quin rose with pops of blue and gold for the murky water. I used a lot of tinted gouache for the rocks. I used a lot of hard edges on purpose to increase drama, but it is messy as a result. And I love that this has a lot of energy. And I think it's interesting because sometimes we shy away from a lot of hard edges. I tend to be someone who's much more comfortable with soft transitions all the time. And so every time I put a hard edge in, my temptation is to scrub it away. But I love that you've kept the edges here and that they are moving all over the paper. There are some passages of softness, especially in the water. And so our eye kind of almost spirals through the painting following that path of hard edges, which I think works really well. And the energy that you've created with those edges, it might be messy, but it gives this a lot of energy, movement, and drama, which I think is really fun. I like that you chose those unusual colors that weren't in your reference photo and were just really willing to take the plunge and be dramatic. You could choose to really swing the pendulum to your focal point as, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. There's almost this, I'm thinking pendulum because you could have a lot of hard edges in your sky and a lot of softness in the landscape to kind of adjust the way your eye moves through the painting, or vice versa. A really soft transitional sky with a lot of contrast, but just a lot more soft edges, and then the hard edges to accentuate the rocks. Having hard edges in both top and bottom gives an interesting tension, which I think is really fun. So it's maybe a unexpected interpretation because we're so often tempted to, place our hard edges in just one part of the painting. I think maybe that makes sense. And here's another closer up version of it. I liked sharing the version with the reference photo beside it because it just makes, it helps us have context and see what's been improvised. Leslie, I wanted to share this just because you commented that you weren't sure about the perspective here, but I think that I think that it actually works really well. I love that it's actually just a little bit exaggerated that that the way your train tracks are placed. So you're commenting that the train might fall off the track, but I'm thinking, well, I actually really feel that movement and that sense of distance because it is a little bit exaggerated. And And you commented, how do I go from value grays to picking colors? So this is basically a value study. You're working with your values and to see where those contrasts are. When it comes to picking colors, color really influences the mood of your painting. So that's something to be aware of. And I'm just not sure. I'm not sure I have a really strong insight on that, except for work with colors you're familiar with. Slowly adding new ones. I love the beautiful murky greens in the left side of the painting. So I like that development. And don't be afraid of color. I just keep my number one rule is, if you're not sure, keep it simple. Pick 3 colors that you like and just play with those obsessively and see how they influence your painting. And that's all I can say about that. Apparently, I've run out of ideas. Moving on to the next painting. Linda, you posted this one and you commented, let's see here. I need to log more brush miles. And so that sounds like a criticism. Here's my painting and I just haven't practiced enough to get really good at it. But I think there's a lot that's working in this painting. So, but I think what I'm seeing in this painting, and it's really hard to know because you didn't give me a great description to work from. So I'm just going to share my thoughts, and hopefully they're not completely off base. In this painting, I can actually see that not only if you're feeling like you need more experience painting, a great place to do that would be on painting this scene more often. I feel a little bit like looking at this, you weren't sure which area you wanted to be your focal point, so you've got a lot of detail all over the place. And so there's a lot that's working really well. I see the water, I see that big focal point foreground tree. My eye goes off into the distance to those dark distant trees. And there's some really lovely little tree elements and grasses in various places. We can see the division between the shore and the water. And so there's a lot happening here. And then there's the path in the foreground. So I'd love to see some versions where you're exploring painting focal point, basically simplifying everything but one section of the painting. So maybe you want to paint that big focal point foreground tree. Let's make everything else in the scene much more softer with minimal detail and see how that comes together. Then do a version where maybe you don't have that near tree and you're focused on the water. By exploring this, you'll not only log more brush miles, but you'll really get to know the scene. You'll connect more deeply and emotionally with it. And that's going to help you as you continue to paint, and you'll be developing strategies to help you edit your landscape photos or your landscape paintings, so that you can make it just a little bit simpler and more dynamic. Generally, what I see is if you really don't know your scene, it's hard to know how to edit out excess detail, and it's hard to know how to direct the viewer through your painting. So the more you paint a scene, the more adept you become at those things. And I'm just going to pause for a second and take a drink of water. I've got a lot going on here and a lot of notes, and I'm just not sure how much time we're going to have. And I also wanted to make sure you could still hear me in the chat. So there's that. So you can see I'm checking. You might be able to even see that I'm checking the chat. Okay, moving on to the next one. Nancy, you shared this one, and I wanted to share it because you made a couple of comments that I liked. And if your description, just having a good description helps me so much. So Nancy says, it's daring for me. This is straight up watercolor on paper, because mostly I do mixed media layers. So once she's gotten this amount of detail down, you're starting to feel stuck. I'm not sure if I want to try and do more to the grassy landscape or to the tree trunk. Clearly the focal point is the tree, but I'm not, the grass looks wonky to me and I just don't know what to do with it. One thing I wanted to just say is, Nancy, please feel free to pull your mixed media in whenever you want. It does not have to be straight watercolor. We are not purists here. We love watercolor. But the strategies that you develop in mixed media painting can add amazing uniqueness, individuality to your paintings. They can help you take things in directions that will just be so exciting for you as you pull together your two loves. At the same time, I mostly paint with straight watercolor, and I have some mixed media in my background. I was a scrapbooker for many years, and so it's funny to me that I've never really pulled scrapbooking into my painting. They're two separate things to me, and I just can't do it. So there's some freedom there. Okay, so what? Yeah, there does feel like this painting needs more, like it needs another layer or maybe some more contrast along the water. Um, I'm just kind of squinting at it right now to try to analyze it, and it really helps to squint at your painting and see how everything fits together. And if I squint, the little river there almost blends in and disappears into the landscape. So I'd love to see a little bit of darker contrast, helping that river to pop just a little bit more. And then, yeah, I would probably work on just adding some depth to bring my focal point tree, help it to come alive. Sometimes an additional layer of some small leaf shapes and then maybe some texture lines on the trunk could help bring that together. And take your time. Like, look, when I'm not sure what to do in a painting, I let it rest for a while. I look at it through my camera viewfinder. I stick it up at the far end of the room so it's the first thing I see when I come into the studio. Seeing it with fresh eyes can really help. And then I often feel like I daydream about a painting. I think about it, and it's funny how setting something aside and just giving it a little bit of time helps us to kind of detach emotionally enough to kind of observe and plan our next move. So it's always, time is one of the best ways to analyze and figure out what your painting needs next. It's just one of the hardest things to be patient with. Petra, this is so pretty, and I wanted to, I think you're, yeah, here we go. Okay. We're running out of time, and I just have so many more I want to share, so we're going to just try to hustle through here. Petra says, I have a general question, and I love this question so much. I really wanted to include you in the critique. I'd love to go more abstract, but it feels like failure, as if I cannot draw good enough. This was true in the past, but in the last half year, I practiced my drawing skills and have improved quite well. But still, I would rather go more abstract, and still it feels like weakness. I would love to hear your point of view in this case. Petra, I know exactly what you mean. Now look at this beautiful painting, people. How can this be weakness? Something simple and evocative and beautiful. It's just lovely and powerful, and that's really, really special. And yet somehow when a painting comes together effortlessly, if it only takes a few minutes to put together, if it only takes a few brush strokes, and sometimes that happens, it feels wrong. It feels like cheating. It's like we should be suffering for our work. Where did that idea come from? We should be showing our amazing skill. I want to suggest to you that there is incredible vulnerability, beautiful simplicity in keeping things simple. Have you ever been around somebody who is just so pompous? They want to tell you everything they know. I'm actually going to switch so I can look you in the eye as we talk about this. I know some people. There was a girl I worked with a few years ago, and she was like one of those one-uppers. Every time I said anything, she always had one better. She was more educated than me. She traveled more, and she just had to let me know about it. There was never a hint of weakness from her. She never had a question. She always had a fact or an answer. This was not a person that anybody liked. She struggled to make connections in the workplace, and she was in management because her dad was the boss, and she was terrible to work for. And I think about the people, the servant leaders that we would follow across hot coals because they are humble, because they're willing to admit their weaknesses and they're willing to show what they don't know. And I think when we're vulnerable in our paintings, when you let that abstract, and it doesn't have to be abstract, but when you show your heart, sometimes that means putting aside skill and saying, well, it's not the strongest painting skill-wise in the world, but it really shows who I am. And so often those are the paintings in my studio here where I'm like, I don't know why, but I really love this painting. I don't know why, because I can't see the skill in the painting, but I can see my heart in it. Oh, that was profound. That's, I don't know. I just think that's really, really powerful. And I hope that, um, that we start to kind of really understand that it doesn't have to be that your painting is the best technically. It's really just that vulnerability of setting your ego aside, getting past your fear of, being criticized or being wrong, and showing who you are. And it feels risky. It feels like we're risking rejection. And in a way we are, because it's very, very personal. And so it is a risk. And yet those are the deepest connections that we're going to make. And I think that's really, really powerful. So yeah, I hope, and I love, oh, you guys, your comments in the chat are lovely. Yeah, Petra, your painting is beautiful, and there is no weakness in showing yourself in your work. And when they move effortlessly, I think that's when we have that open channel, sharing who we are in our work. And some of that is your skill comes together, so you don't have to think about technique so much. You just get to share the things that you think are beautiful. And somehow it feels wrong, and I don't know why that is, but I think we do need to keep challenging that feeling. Okay, so let's see if we can't squeeze a few more in here. Rachel, I just wanted to share this one because it's another beautiful piece. And yeah, just look at how special that is. I'm losing my notes. They're getting all tangled up. Rachel, this is my second attempt. She says the first was a total bust after I added some Brusho crystals. Yeah, Brusho can take over. You have to add it with such a light touch. Failure is an opportunity to practice and play, right? I am curious as to where this is, Rachel, because it reminds me a little bit of our trip to Ireland. Just those beautiful moody skies and the mountains and the rocks. Yeah, it feels like Ireland to me. I like the light in this one, but I struggled with the rocks. It does capture the heart of my experience of being in this place this week. Yes, it is beautiful. There's some lovely watermarks in those rocks that really, really create a lovely kind of passage and story in the painting. The rocks, because I'm trying to figure out too, because they're a little bit of a distraction. I don't want to. And I don't want you to lose the beautiful freshness of this painting because you're obsessed with making that one area perfect. That would be a mistake. That would be a bigger mistake than having, less than ideal rocks. So I'm just wondering if maybe a couple of darkest darks, like along the base of the rocks, just to accentuate the shadows and help them feel rooted into the ground. That might be all that's needed, is just a couple of brush strokes to do that. That might balance them out just a little bit more. I would be very restrained in trying to tweak them too much because they really are, the level of distraction or whatever that they are is minimal, I think. Because the beauty of the mountains is so lovely that I just keep going back there, if that makes sense. Raymond, I had to share this, and then I noticed in the group that you posted another version that had a beautiful dynamic feeling. It was just like one step further than this. So unfortunately I wasn't able to get that into our critique session here, but I do have somewhere here your notes, maybe. Okay, you had questions about contrasts, where to place them and how to use them to direct the eye. And I want to just point out here, first of all, that there's amazing contrast in your boat. Your eye goes right there. I love the way you paint rocks, and it makes me want to visit you up in Nunavut there because I love how you see the beauty in your landscape, and a landscape that often gets a reputation for being quite desolate. You don't have trees, and so you get to see the beautiful color in the rocks and in the moss and the lichens and so forth. And in the light, you're in a place that I think it's probably about light about 24 hours a day up there for you right now, isn't it? Something I wanted to point out is there's actually two really beautiful passages here, and they are kind of competing with each other, unfortunately. But just on their own, they're really gorgeous. I would almost crop out the top 2 inches of your painting and frame it to stand alone, because that passage of cliffs and then the even more distant landscape behind it. It just has a lovely shape, and I really like the way you handle your edges. It's a very unique style to you, and I hope you never lose that, because I love those gorgeous, strong, dynamic shapes and how you use them in your paintings. Because you have I'm just trying to think here. Because you have those competing areas of contrast, it does need to be, this painting doesn't quite pull together the way you want it to. And so that's really a matter of kind of strengthening some areas in order to make the other ones recede. And if you have strong contrasts in a place that's not your focal point, it's often very hard to decrease those, like to lift out or anything to soften that area. So you're better off usually darkening your contrasts in another area. And often those are very minor tweaks. One thing you could do is even just putting a darker wash over the back, the top third of your painting would cause the foreground, the boat and the rocks in the foreground, to come forward just a little bit more. So if you just darken the value of that whole area, just a hair, just a shade, that would make that contrast happen as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But do go take a look at Raymond's latest painting in the community, because it's just that next level. And I like seeing successive versions because they always get stronger. Even when you experiment and it looks like a step back, you're still strengthening your ability to depict the scene. And it's a real challenge to try to get to the heart of what you want to show. And sometimes it can get really frustrating because it seems like you're doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same result. And even that is part of the learning process. It's an important part of the learning process. Roberta shared this one, and you commented, Roberta, that this is version number 12 and you are ready to move on, and that is okay. Even if you're not quite feeling like you've gotten to where you want to get, sometimes it's just like, what, this painting's making me angry. I'm going to take the lessons from it and move to the next painting, and that is okay. I really actually think you've done a beautiful job with your composition here. There's warm and cool in the background. We've got that feeling of light shining through the trees right down the center. And additionally, that feeling of light continues down through the water as we've got that path of light framed by the darker rocks. I love the way you've simplified your background so that even though we have a story being told there, the light coming through the trees, our eye keeps going back to the water and to the movement of the water there. And you've done a beautiful job with that. So I actually think this is really successful, and it's just getting better every time you do a version. So make sure to chase your what ifs. Whenever I'm working on multiple versions of the same painting, I really try to pay attention to the parts that I like and the parts I have questions about. What if I changed the color to this? What if I really dramatized the contrasts in that one area? Those are things that help me make my paintings stronger. Those little experiments and giving paintings the chance to surprise me. Rocklin, we are winding down, and that's good because I told myself we were gonna go right till 11, and we're about 2 minutes away. Rocklin comments, this is draft 10. She says it's getting closer. And Rocklin, you've been painting your marsh for years now, and it's so beautiful. And Rocklin has been one of my students for quite a long time. And some of you have very familiar names to me because we have been connected online here for a long time. So I love seeing your work grow, and I have full confidence in your ability to just keep getting better, because it's amazing what amazing stuff you're making. And we haven't run out of beautiful paintings yet. And all the hundreds and thousands of paintings that I've seen from myself and other students, there's so much beauty that we get to show in our work. Rocklin says, the colors and shapes and feel are what I want to say about how much I love the pink morning light of the marsh, the hope I feel when I stare out into it, and the joy I feel. The marsh is a place of renewal, birth, and hope. It's the nursery for many marine animals, such as dolphins, and it cleans and filters the water of the river. It fills me with joy. I still have some technique issues to work out, and will carry on to draft 11 to figure it out. I really love the beautiful colors in your marshland here. Look at the warm glow there. I noticed for myself, we've got some marshy areas in our region, and the more I see them, the more beautiful colors I see. One day everything turned from brown, and all of a sudden I could see the purple shades in the browns of the marsh in the spring. And that was really special. So the more we look at the things that we love, the more beauty and possibility we see in how we can paint them. You do have a little bit of competition between your lower left tree and your upper left tree. So I would focus on just trying to find a balance in your contrasts, in your dark values there. I think probably the lower left is beautifully dark actually, and I would probably have gone a little bit softer and paler with that upper tree. Just not committing too soon to those strong darks can really help you to feel your way through that part. Let's see here. Suzanne shared this one. Suzanne, here are my paintings that I have tried to vary. Although I have been working on not feeling any pressure and having fun when painting, I do not feel that I am moving forward. I love the place where the card is taken, the reference photo, and it is me, but the painting becomes stiff and without life, which is sad because it would be so fun to get it. Grateful if I can get some tips on improvements. I love the beautiful feel of the middle one. It's you've gone a little bit softer and more atmospheric with your shapes. They're not as many crisp edges. And by taking out the trees, notice how our eye goes right to the rock wall and just kind of stays, lingers there, I guess. I don't know if stays is the right word, but it just changes the scene a little bit. One way you could do that and include the trees would be just to go way lighter on the value of the tree branches, make them really thin and a little paler. Generally, when I'm painting really fine branches like that, rather than feeling like I need to paint every branch in like a dark brown or something, I feel like it works better when I just suggest the branches with a few branches in a paler value rather than many branches that are smaller in a dark value, if that makes sense. Getting to the heart of what we want to show is such a challenge because often we don't know what it is until we really dig into it. And I think that you have I think that you are growing. I know that you're growing, but I can see it in your work here. It's being willing to try those different possibilities and to explore those different questions that you're asking. So, we have the first version at the top where you're much more, it feels much more like you're just working to establish where everything is positioned, maybe all of those shapes. And then in the next version, you get to work a little bit more on interpretation. And so, so that just gets to continue. So maybe the next question is, what if my rock wall got even bigger and you could barely see the rest of the landscape? How would that change the scene? What if my rocks were really strong and gritty and then everything else was really soft? It's in chasing those what ifs that help us to kind of figure out, excuse me, to figure out what we want to say and how we want to say it. And a lot of times that we end up surprising ourselves. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit of an exercise in trust and blind faith because sometimes we're working something, we don't feel inspired, and we have to push through that point until that next breakthrough comes. And it will come. It does come. This one is Suzanne's. And Suzanne, you were about ready to move on to something else as well. And I really think this was such a fun little series that you did. I love the colors. And you said you're ready for a new reference photo, and that is okay. I really love the colors here. We've got warm bracketed by cool and then back to warm again. And I just like the energy that you've put into this. I've been painting a little bit of desert scenes, and it's a total switch, change in colors and change in mood from what I'm usually painting. And it's like learning how to paint again. And every time I paint a new scene, I have to teach myself how to paint it. And I see that happening here. And the strategies you've used here are going to go with you into the next painting. And this one I had to share because Tanya commented. We're almost done, folks. You talked about feeling like this painting needed something more. And I wanted to share that because it's really beautiful. There's something really beautiful about the softness and the hint of edges and those strong dark flower centers. that is just, it just gives you this lovely feeling. And yet I know exactly what you mean about feeling like it needs something more, because I can paint. So I do that too. I can paint something pretty that doesn't feel like enough. And I think sometimes that's just where we're at, is like we want more than just pretty. We want to show, I don't know. I'm not just satisfied with making a beautiful painting anymore. I need to get my heart in there. And sometimes that comes from pushing that envelope, usually that rush of taking a big risk. So maybe I need to do a version like this and be less like here, something like this. Maybe you've taken the time, you've painted that flower shape, and then you very deliberately softened some edges. So then the next challenge would be, what if I paint those and I'm a little less deliberate about how I soften the edges? Maybe I'm a little more dramatic about how I do it. Or maybe I put in a pop of a really unexpected color. So often when I feel like I'm just stopping short of, I'm stopping at pretty, I'm stopping short of what I really want to say, it's because I haven't actually gone in and given and taken a risk. I haven't invested anything that cost me something. And I think when we do invest to that place where our painting might cost us something, we're at that edge of maybe I'm going to put in a brushstroke that ruins the whole painting. That little risk. And this is for someone who's maybe at a more advanced level. If you're a brand new painter, everything is a risk. But once you get to that place where you can paint a competent scene, then it's like, well, I need to invest a little more of myself in order for my painting to feel, in order for me to feel connected to my painting. Yeah, that actually was a helpful insight to me. Thank you for sharing that painting, Tanya, because I needed to think about that topic. Vered shared these paintings from the Heart-Led Landscape series. Vered, I always love seeing your color theory, and I thought this would be a great one to. Actually, I'm going to save this one. I'm going to come back to it. We're going to do this second last. Yvonne, and I know you'll recognize Yvonne's name because she's been so active and engaged in our community here. One tree done, a bit overworked. I don't see where it's overworked, Yvonne. I think you've managed to disguise that really well. Please give me some critique. I wanted the focal point to be the end of the path, lower right, but I'm not sure I accomplished that. Well, I don't feel like I'm going right to the path. I feel like I'm more focused on the tree because it's beautiful. And I love the line you've placed in here. Yvonne, you have not just the beautiful little twiggy lines of the tree, but there's lovely kind of movement lines in the path. There's lines in the grass that you've used, I think, masking fluid for some of those. And then there's little pretty lines in the clouds in the top left as well. All of that just gives this painting such a beautiful little dynamic energy, which I think is so much fun. And so you might be obsessing with whether or not you overworked the tree, but the rest of us are just enjoying how lovely and full of movement that this is. Okay, Vered, I'm coming to you last because I loved your comment and I thought it was a great way to wrap up our critique session. This morning, I woke up feeling some emptiness after this 3 fantastic weeks with the Heart-Led Landscape course. At the same time, I also felt happy thinking about coming painting adventures and knowing that I'm now equipped with more in-depth know-hows and longing to try out new ways to view and interpret a landscape. And then you go on to say some wonderful things about the course. Thank you so much. Heart-Led Landscapes is just a course that I've been really excited about because it shares my heart. I love the landscape. And I love learning how to paint it like me. And so to hear you talking about it, Vered, in the same way, it just that's very satisfying and fulfilling to me. Thank you. Vered says, working with 10 paintings of the same subject was a very important experience for me. It opened my mind to another attitude to painting and started a journey in me toward a more intuitive, sensual way of painting, being more playful and daring to be freer from self-imposed performance anxiety and pressure. A few more pieces came into place and it was a good addition to the watercolor mastery course. Yeah, they do kind of fit really well together, don't they? Vered says, at times I wished for a little guidance during the course, just a few words about what I can change or work with some more, but I'm also aware of how many people we are in this course. It must be hard to follow all of us in just 3 weeks. And yes, 3 weeks isn't long enough. That's why we gave you guys 2 months in our Fearless Artist community. You can continue to post your Heart-Led Landscape paintings. I will continue to be in the group sharing with you and critiquing your work and giving you input. I know also Vered says that it's my responsibility to pick up the parts of the course that are relevant to me personally, to analyze what I need to strengthen and work with the parts I can relate to right now. Yes, that is important. Your own learning helps you to grow more than the advice I can give, really. And we wanted you to have lifetime access to Heart-Led Landscapes. This is a course you can revisit time and time again. My dad just showed up, so we're going to wrap up here, but I just want to say thank you for all of you for being a part of this course, for being a part of Heart-Led Landscapes, and for all that you've done during the 3 weeks. It's a huge amount of content to go through in 3 weeks. So continue to share your work in the group. Continue to post your work for critique. I will be checking in. This is not our last critique session either. And then in July, we'll be doing a beginner series. So we'll be going over basic techniques in the Heart-Led style. And I can't wait to share that with you. Now, I seriously am out of time. And we are out of time for questions. So we are going to have to take that over to the Fearless Artist community. Don't forget it's fearlessartist.net. Anything you have to ask about, just post there. You can tag me in it or tag Robin. Both of us are there, and Evelyn and Stephanie as well, to help you navigate the site and to help support you as you become your own favorite artists. I'm really proud of all of you. We're going to do this again very soon. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you got some insights that will help you grow your watercolor paintings. And continue to direct your learning so that you can really love your own work. We don't have to be bound up in criticism. We can find what we love and just continue to do more of it in every painting. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day. Enjoy your paintings. Enjoy your painting time, and your painting process will bring your most beautiful Heart-Led work. When we love what we do, it shows in our work. Okay, bye for now.